Hello, everybody, and welcome to Golf Convergence's the webinar series on Step 5, Architecture, Agronomy, and Maintenance. We are very privileged to have with us today a very special guest, Kevin Norby, a member of the American Society of Golf Course Architects, with the firm a principal at Herfort-Norby in Chaska, Minnesota. Kevin, hello and welcome.
Jim, thank you. Thanks for the invitation to participate in your webinar series.
Could you give us some background? How did you get involved in golf course architecture?
Well, Jim, I got into the business back in 1989 when I met a gentleman named Don Herfort, who was a golf course architect and a fellow with the American Society of Golf Course Architects. And I worked with Don for 10 years after meeting him, and then he retired sometime later, and I carried on the business and have been working here in Chaska ever since.
That's fabulous. What projects are you currently working on?
Well, we've had a busy year, actually. I can honestly say that I haven't seen this much activity in the golf business in some 25 years. We've got projects right now in Denver, Colorado for the city of Louisville. Got a project right now, a 27-hole renovation for the city of Sioux Falls, complete remodel on their existing course at Elmwood. And we have a number of projects we're doing right now, long-range master plans for golf courses. So we've been busy this year.
Well, that's absolutely awesome. Let's talk today about the low-hanging fruit in golf course architecture. Well, you get a lot of calls from people in the central part of the United States looking for architecture and renovation work. What do you find to be the challenges? Because a guest sees more in an hour than a host sees in 1 year. I love this proverb because when you own and operate a golf course, you start taking a lot of things for granted. What's your experience with respect to that? And when you go out to a golf course and start working with committees and owners?
You know, it's interesting, Jim. I think that's exactly right. I talk with clubs all the time, and it's funny how we'll walk a golf course with the golf course board or the greens committee, and I'll say something, and they'll all get this blank look on their face and say, wow, I never even noticed that. I've been playing here for years and never even noticed that. So it's just funny how a fresh new looks can sometimes bring a different perspective.
Well, what are the issues that you deal with? I know the USGA and the Architects Society just came out with this pace of play checklist. What's your thought on this?
Well, I think it's nice they're looking at this, and I think that it's largely, you know, we all know that everybody's been saying that the problem with golf is it takes too long, it's too expensive, and it's too difficult. And I think this was an opportunity to maybe look at the part of it that says it takes too long. My concern, though, is that I want to be careful, I hope we're being careful, that we're being clear to golfers, and I should say new golfers, that this doesn't mean you need to keep going and you need to get going and you know, pick up the pace. One of the things that I think is really intimidating for an entry-level golfer or somebody who just golfs 1 or 2 times a year, maybe doesn't consider themselves a golfer, it's really intimidating to go out on a golf course, and I think there's this fear that you might swing and miss, or you might swing and make a bad shot, and there's this fear that you might be keeping the people behind you, holding them up. And so I think that the emphasis here is kind of at the bottom of the page. It talks about we need to keep golf fun or make golf fun, and so the emphasis should be on, you know, playing quickly but playing comfortably, and not, you know, not getting too concerned about what other people are thinking.
What are you hearing from course owners in terms of tee it forward? What's your position on that?
Yeah, you know, I think that the Tee It Forward program and the you know, the programs that are really encouraging people to get involved in the game and to make it more fun, those are great. Those are great programs, and that's why I'm a little concerned about this pace of play program and just how we send that message. But that the whole Tee It Forward program has really been good. I'm amazed how many places I go and how many people actually know about it. So it's been a pretty effective message. Oftentimes, forward tees were kind of an afterthought, and we used to call those women's tees, but I guess it's politically correct now to call those forward tees. I think we like to see the forward set of tees somewhere around that 46 to 4,800 yards. And we go to golf courses all the time where those are up over 5,000 yards, and that's just plain too much for somebody who's maybe not, very experienced or is just learning the game. So,
what's interesting to me in the surveys we've done recently on what is the ideal length of a golf course, in Virginia Beach, which is a naval community with a lot of great golf courses, the average length of a golf course for a man was 5,900 yards, and you're exactly on point. It was at 4,700 yards was the preferred length for a woman. Well, what are the issues that you're hearing?
I think the three things, I put together the slide that you're looking at, but the three things that we probably get more calls on than anything else are safety issues, maintenance issues, and what can we do to increase our rounds or our revenue. And if you're a private club, this translates to growing your membership or retaining your members. If you're a public golf course, it has to do with how do we attract people to our golf course. And they're really two different things. The way we design a public golf course is really quite different than the way we would design a private golf course. Safety issues, we've all been to golf courses where you've had the wire mesh, or you've had cart paths that are dangerous, and probably those are actually fairly easy issues to fix usually, except when we go to an older golf course where the golf corridors are really quite narrow. I remember back in 1990 when I first got in the golf business, we were laying out fairways, landing areas at 210 yards. Today, we're laying those fairways out, those landing areas out, at somewhere between 275 and 300 yards, depending on the kind of golf course we're working with. And again, public, private, if they're holding some major events of some sort, state qualifiers or whatever. I think those issues with corridors have really changed. People are not only hitting the ball further, but they're hitting them further offline. So when you have situations like this where the holes are just very close together, and this is a course down in Iowa, a very old golf course, 1920s, early 20s, and they've got these fences all over the place. The holes are close by. They're doing, well in excess of 35,000 rounds. We need to go in and just sort of figure out what we can do to help them make the course more safe, more enjoyable.
Well, it's interesting to see the screen, not only the screen in the foreground, but in the middle of the picture, there's another screen, and you're kind of going, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's happening on bunker design? Because you said that that's an issue that you're getting a lot of requests on also.
Well, and that kind of plays into the whole safety issue too, so that's a nice segue. Because people are hitting the ball further and hitting the ball further offline, oftentimes we find that the bunkers are really not positioned properly. And bunkers are such an important part of a golf course because they affect not only playability and the visual quality of the golf course, but they really have a big impact on maintenance. And the way we design these bunkers is really largely a function of your maintenance budget. Again, who's going to play the golf course? Is it public, private? Who are you trying to compete with? Who's your competition as a golf facility? So the way we design those and the number of bunkers is really a function of the maintenance budget. Here's a perfect example of a golf course that has, this bunker is probably 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. It's probably as large as the green. And you can see right up along the edge of the putting surface, or on the putting surface side of the bunker, how that edge has been eroded and cut back and probably was another 10 or maybe 12 feet wider. Bunkers have a tendency to grow over time as those bunkers get edged, particularly if they're edging them with a sand pro or they're going in with a shovel once or twice a year and cleaning up the edges. So that dirt then washes down into the bunker and it contaminates the sand, and so you get standing water in the middle of the bunker. You can see here also where the sand pro leaves the bunker and goes out onto the golf cart path. Here's a bunker that was recently remodeled. Actually, the course was newly built. And you'll see on the left side there's hardly any erosion because there's no water really getting into the bunker other than what lands on the grass. But on the other side, all that water from the fairway runs off the fairway, runs into the bunkers, and this is what happens after they get a sizable rain. So really challenging with that flash sand. And one thing we're seeing is, I guess as kind of a trend these days, is everybody's talking about how can we reduce the maintenance on our budgets, our maintenance budgets, and specifically our bunkers. So when you look at a bunker like this, there's no way to use a sand pro. This has to be sand raked, excuse me. And then the sand is flashed up, quite high. It's difficult to keep the grass alive on slopes like that. So again, the way we design a bunker is really a function of the maintenance budget. And so here's a bunker that's relatively easy to take care of, even though it's not a big round circle and there's still that cape or finger coming out into the golf course, into the bunker. It's still a relatively easy bunker to take care of. There's no steep slopes. The sand is relatively flat. And so we're sort of seeing a trend towards what we call grass down instead of sand up bunkers. And so instead of flashing the sand up and having to worry about contamination and erosion, we're seeing kind of these gentle slopes around the edges of the bunkers. And again, this is a course that I would say has a moderate maintenance budget. So they've got some room to do some string trimming. Their procedure is to go in and put the sand pro in the bunker, and then they hand rake the edges. This is maybe one way to look at that.
How would you cut the cape here?
Yeah, that one cape that you just pointed to is probably a little more severe, but it also is a little bit of an illusion. If you look at the very right and the very left, those are really gentle slopes that can be mowed with any kind of an articulating mower. So something like a Toro Sidewinder, and that's really the goal, is to not have to have specialized pieces of equipment or do fly mowing or string trimming. The only real issue on a bunker like this would be that long cape there where the mower has to drive out onto the cape and then come back off of it. But again, certainly much easier than the bunkers we saw previously.
In a green, they usually say that elevation changes of 1 to 4 degrees. If you get much above that, the greens become unplayable. What about the angles into a bunker, and can the golfers see these as they're approaching the hole? Is there any rules of thumb in terms of the mounding that goes around the bunker?
Yeah, it's obviously a little bit different, and it varies from condition to condition. So if we're hitting from above the hole or below the hole, that obviously has a big impact on it. But the most important thing is that we keep water from running into the bunker. So regular rainfall or irrigation wouldn't have any impact on most bunkers. But if you get a large downpour, a 1-inch rainfall or something, then you're going to be subject to erosion. And so you might end up having to use something like this, some of the fabric bunker liners. Now this is obviously a fairly small bunker in the sense that it's not very wide and there's not a lot of room for a sand pro to turn around. So if you've got the budget, you might have a bunker that looks like this, and if you do, it's going to need some sort of a fabric liner or some of the new spray-on liners that you're hearing about with Clingstone, Better Billy Bunker, Sportcrete. But these are expensive, and they can run anywhere from about $1.25 to about almost $3 a square foot. So if you've got 80 or 100,000 square feet of bunkers on your course, just to put the liners in, not to rebuild them or the sand or the drain tile, can be a couple $100,000. But it will save some time in the long run if your bunkers are designed in such a way that they're prone to erosion or washing out.
So the essence of Billy bunkers and spray-on liners is that it mitigates the erosion within a bunker?
Right. One of the things with Clingstone is it's kind of like a pickup bed liner. It's a spray-on product. It doesn't have a lot of tooth to it. Better Billy bunker is actually pea gravel or rock that has a polymer sprayed on it, so it's got much more tooth to it. So it holds the sand in place better. So the sand will still move if you get a very large downpour or a large rain event, but the thought is that the edges would not contaminate or erode and contaminate the sand. So again, it's expensive, but if you're going to have a bunker that requires that sort of or a bunker that looks like that, to differentiate yourself in the market, you're going to have some sort of a liner.
Well, we talked about the aggressives more in an hour than a hosties in a year. Talk about this picture and what are the challenges and what should be done to fix what's obviously a difficult situation, because you look at Oakmont, they had 4,000 trees and they cut them, and there's all these tree huggers that every time you want to trim a tree, and I maintain that a golf course is a living organism and that you need to be trimming trees and taking down trees annually as a way of maintaining the playing course that were originally designed by you as an architect. What's going on here?
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is a project that we're working on in Colorado, and it was built in 1989. And we're in the middle of a $5 million renovation on this course. We did a long-range master plan, and then they were flooded out by a storm. But since 1989, you can see what's happened here is that these trees have grown up. These are cottonwoods and willows, and trees are very precious in Colorado because there's not a lot of them, and they tend to be found in the lower lands unless they're pines. You know, this is actually standing on the sixth hole looking at the fairway, and you can't even see the fairway. I mean, you see a little piece of the rough over on the right, just kind of to the backside of that cart, but it's a very difficult hole. I would say one of the biggest issues we see probably after bunkers is the impact that trees are having on the golf course. Not only do they create issues with turf quality, but they create issues with playability, and that has an impact on pace of play, and that has an impact on people's enjoyment of the game. So
I maintain cottonwoods and willows, when I see them on a golf course, they're just water sucking trees with high roots. I always feel that there's three kinds of trees that should never be on a golf course: a cottonwood, a willow, and a Christmas tree, meaning a pine or a spruce that's been trimmed up from the ground and it looks like a Christmas tree. What's your thought on that? How far am I off base?
yeah, you're not very far off base. I think there's probably, I would agree that willows really have no place on a golf course unless they happen to be a specimen, weeping willow that's near a pond and isn't really in play, because they're very messy trees. Cottonwoods, there are some seedless cottonwoods, some new varieties of cottonwoods. All of these are what we call hybrid cottonwoods, so they're old trees that have grown up over the last 30 years or so. They have weak branches, they have surface roots, which make it difficult and which make potentially dangerous or even doing damage to equipment. As far as evergreens, I'm not a fan of spruce trees on the golf course. I think they're very difficult to grow grass under. They have a lot of disease issues, and they don't look very good when they're limbed up. Pines, on the other hand, if you're dealing with ponderosa pine, for instance, or Scotch pine, those can actually be quite nice on the golf course, and can actually be, because you can grow grass right up to the base of a pine tree usually.
That's great. Well, talk about shade and poor turf quality. Here's a really good picture, and you've got another one right here. What's the impact of this in terms of, the obvious solution would be, take down the tree. What are your thoughts?
Well, these are a couple of tees, but we see this frequently. And look at the left side of this golf course. Those trees aren't even mature. They're only 20 feet tall. So, but yeah, you have issues with not only with shade, but you also have issues with root encroachment. So we know that the roots on a big tree like this one on the right actually extend well out into the tee, probably where that person is walking, and well beyond that. And those are the feeder roots that are actually stealing moisture and stealing nutrients from the golf course turf. If they're located anywhere around the green or anywhere around the tee, you've got a pretty serious issue with turf recovery. They can also create issues in the fairways because you've got issues with compaction as well. So,
well, here's a picture of a cart path with obviously a drainage issue. How do you fix this easily? Because you see this a lot of the times, especially where you've got dirt.
This is pretty common, and this is, obviously if you get these wet areas and then the carts drive through it and then the mowers drive through it, we like to go in and create small collection areas, and we put a little catch basin in, and we have to run that drain tile to somewhere. If you're fortunate enough to have sandy soils, you might still have these kinds of issues because the top layer of soil is probably compacted and sealed off, but sometimes we can run those catch basins just down to a gravel layer or down to the water table, which will drain those. So they're actually quite easy, and that's actually something that can be done in-house if you're given some direction.
Well, the pump station, this looks like is almost non-functioning. Who calls you when a pump station gets in this kind of condition? What's going on here?
Well, this is actually the inside of the pump house, obviously a very old pump station and cobbled together. The next photo is actually the outside of the pump house, and that's equally as humorous because that's the pond fill line and then the main line or Z pipe that's going in the ground out to the golf course. So typically when I get a phone call about irrigation, it's the golf course superintendent who's frustrated and just looking for some way to educate or inform his owner as to what the issues are. And so we'll go in and we'll do an assessment of the irrigation system. Sometimes we'll bring in an irrigation consultant. It's so clear, it's so obvious what the issue is. And it doesn't have to be an entire irrigation system. It might just be the pump station, or it might just be putting some VFDs on the pump station. In this particular case, we ended up having to go in and put a pump station and a new well in.
And I hear about $400,000?
Yeah, that particular one was about $400,000 because that golf course was actually drawing water out of a reservoir that had zebra mussels, and they didn't want that to get into their irrigation system.
I can understand. Visit with us on what about practice facilities? What should those on the webinar be focusing on with respect to their practice facilities?
Well, this sort of gets to the third point that, frequently when I get a call from somebody, they're wondering what they can do to increase revenue or increase play or more effectively compete with the other golf courses in their market. And practice facilities, and especially driving ranges, are one really good way to do that. If you've got the best driving range in town, you've got a tee that's large enough so that the turf can recover quickly. You've maybe got a concrete tee line so that when you have a large outing, or you have early in the season or late in the season when the turf is still dormant, you can put people on there and not compromise turf quality. It really makes a difference, and it helps attract people to your course and differentiate you in the market. So here's an example of a turf tee where we went in and added a concrete tee line and put fairly inexpensive mats, and it's really made a difference. I think this club actually told me that they did as much revenue in the first month they were open as they did the entire previous year after they renovated this driving range. Here's another project, different project. We went in and enlarged their driving range tee, put a concrete tee line across the back. This is a very old, actually, Donald Ross course, the Minnetonka Club. Doubled the size of their driving range tee, added some target bunkers, target greens, regrassed it, put in new irrigation. That was about a $700,000 driving range, but we also did a driving range just recently that was about $80,000 to go in and increase the size of their driving range tee, and the superintendent did a little bit of work on their own. So.
Well, I'm looking at this picture and I see bunkers by the landing target areas. Is that actually sand, or how would that be maintained? What's the impact of labor here with respect to bunkers by the practice green?
Yep, this is actually the Minnetonka Club again, and so that's that plan we looked at a moment ago. The bunker in the foreground is actually sand, and that's the same sand and the same style bunkers that are out on the golf course. The bunkers that are out on the driving range, those are actually faux bunkers. They're not real bunkers. They're not depressions. They're flat areas that are made to look like bunkers and to accent the greens. And those are actually constructed with ag lime or a compacted gravel. And so the ball picker can actually go right through those and pick the balls out of them. So it's a nice way to sort of create a really dramatic statement.
Well, how many golf courses do you see have a master plan, and why would you want to put a master plan in place, and how long should it last? Business plans go 3 to 5 years. What's the cost of a master plan, and what are its advantages?
I think that it doesn't matter really whether you're selling cars or shoes or golf. I think whatever business you're in, you need to have some sort of a business plan. And when we're talking about golf courses, we're talking about a golf course master plan. And a master plan can be anything from a very simple drawing that simply shows what improvements are needed, up to something much more involved that involves an operational review, and that's why we like to work with you, Jim. I mean, you do a great job of helping us understand the market and understand who the customer is and understand which projects are most likely to bring some sort of a return on the investment. So as you can see here, a master plan can include a lot of things, and I kind of touched on that in the very strictest sense or the simplest sense. It's a simple architectural assessment, and where we would go in and we would look at safety and irrigation and drainage, the size of the tees, the position of the tees, the location of hazards, and we would help with recommendations on improving those issues. We would provide cost estimates and a phasing strategy so that maybe over time that club can implement those ideas.
So if we look at this as an example of whitefish, this would be one of the deliverables that would occur from a master plan?
Yeah, we do something, and again, this is, if you're looking for just a bare bones master plan study, we might not do one of these, but this sort of a hole-by-hole analysis is really valuable for the private club where you need to go to your membership, or you need to have something in your files that helps the club understand why you're talking about making changes to a particular hole. So this hole-by-hole analysis really documents kind of the strengths and weaknesses of each hole. And then when we create a drawing, a master plan drawing, you might end up with something that looks something like this. Drawing of the overall course that indicates where the new tees would be, which bunkers would be removed, where the drainage issues are, and how you might actually resolve that. So
here's the example, Kevin, of a master plan in terms of this is what you're talking about in terms of a very specific hole-by-hole analysis that they would get as part of the master plan.
Yeah, and this is that sort of pretty picture that you can put up on the wall or you can pull out when you're making a presentation to the membership to help them understand what the scope of the project is and why they ought to be considering some sort of change. You can see here this this course has got a lot of issues with trees, and so you can see how they're encroaching on the fairways, and in some cases we're realigning the fairways or realigning the tees and removing trees in order to deal with that.
So you would recommend that every single golf course have a master plan. What does it take? What's the cost and what's the time frame of master plans? I've heard all kinds of ranges.
I think, again, for a very simple master plan that's simply a drawing and maybe you're working with one decision maker, maybe a private owner, you might be looking at something that's in the $15,000 or $20,000 range. If you're looking for something that includes a comprehensive business plan and an operational review, you probably know, Jim, I mean, that can be upwards of $60,000 to $100,000 depending on how.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for taking some time to be with us today. We certainly enjoy working with you, and it's amazing to see your work as an artist as it's coming out at Bemidji, and the fact that you've just been retained by the Minneapolis Park Board to help them on the strategic vision with those 6 courses that are coming up on their 100-year anniversaries, which is just great. I can't wait to see Coal Creek next year. And so, Kevin, thanks for the time today. It was absolutely awesome.
Jim, we enjoyed it as well. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Y'all have a good day. We greatly appreciate your being with us. Thank you.